let's talk about something that can feel, well, a little weird in our modern world. And that's repetitive prayer. Things like the Rosary, the Jesus prayer, or just saying the same holy words over and over. In a culture that's all about innovation and novelty, this ancient practice can seem kind of out of place, even a little mindless. And that's the big question, isn't it? Is it all just empty ritual, vain repetition? Look, it's a totally fair question, and it really gets to the heart of a practice that is thousands of years old, and for so many of us today, completely misunderstood. Because, this is nothing new. This is a kind of sacred technology that's been around forever, from the Desert Fathers in the 4th century all the way through medieval monasteries. But in our nonstop, fast-paced world, it's so easy to just dismiss it. Yeah, you hear those words all the time. Rote, meaningless. But what if that's not the whole story? What if there's something profound going on, something deep beneath the surface? Well, to find out, we're going to peel back the layers. And we're not starting with theology. Nope, we're starting with your brain. That's right, we're going to look at the hard science, the actual, measurable, biological impact this ancient practice has on our bodies and our minds. And trust me, the results are absolutely fascinating. So what is actually happening here? Well, it's a full-body event. When you engage in repetitive, rhythmic speech, it literally induces calming brainwaves, alpha and theta waves, the same kind you find in deep meditation. It physically lowers your heart rate and your levels of cortisol, the main stress hormone. This whole process activates what's called the parasympathetic nervous system. That's our rest and digest mode. And it even syncs up with your breathing, making it slower and deeper. This isn't just a spiritual idea. It's a real physiological shift. And listen, this isn't some fringe science. Researchers like Dr. Andrew Newberg, who's a total pioneer in the field of neurotheology, have actually documented these changes. They can literally see on brain scans how these practices alter the parts of our brain that deal with focus, emotion, and our sense of self. It's incredible. So the takeaway here is actually pretty simple, but it's also profound. This simple act of repetition can physically flip a switch in your body's operating system, shifting you from that high-alert fight-or-flight state to a calm rest and digest state. It's like a built-in tool for hacking your own nervous system. Okay, so with that scientific foundation laid, we can start to see how this practice builds into something even bigger. We're going to move from biology to psychology now and explore this idea of spiritual muscle memory. Just think about how an athlete trains. A basketball player shoots thousands of free throws. A golfer swings the club over and over. They drill the same basic movements until they become completely automatic, bypassing conscious thought when the pressure is on. Well, spiritual training works on the exact same principle. By repeating prayers and gestures, you bypass all that noisy intellectual chatter in your head to build these deep, automatic spiritual reflexes. And this is the part that's so crucial to get. You can't reason your way into a subconscious habit. It just doesn't work that way. The subconscious mind learns by doing, by absorbing patterns. Repetition is literally the language it understands. It carves these neural pathways that over time become the brain's default setting, the path of least resistance. And you see this so powerfully in childhood. A child's first 7 to 10 years are these critical imprint years. They learn by watching, by imitating, by repeating, not by listening to complex arguments. So those simple daily rituals like saying grace at dinner or bedtime prayers, they aren't just little lessons. They become a kind of subconscious catechesis, embedding these holy words and actions so deeply that they can stay with a person for their entire life. So we've covered the science and the psychology. Now we can get to the theological heart of it all, because this isn't just about calming yourself down or forming a habit. It's about creating a state of being where you're truly receptive to something more. A lot like silence, repetition is a tool that's designed to quiet the ego, to turn down the volume on that constant inner monologue we all have. The goal isn't to stop thinking altogether, but to enter a state that's beyond all that surface-level analysis. The words become a rhythm, the rhythm becomes an atmosphere, and that atmosphere, that's where prayer truly begins. And this really highlights a huge difference in how we often approach prayer today. The modern view tends to emphasize intellectual understanding and self-expression. That feeling that you have to constantly reinvent it, make it fresh, make it yours. The traditional view is totally different. The focus there is on surrendering the self, on entering a sacred pattern that's much larger than you are, so that you can become receptive to the divine. And there's maybe no better example of this than St. Thomas Aquinas. I mean, this is a guy who spent his entire life reaching the absolute peak of human theological thought. And then, after having a mystical vision, he declared that everything he had ever written was like straw. Straw! It's just a stunning admission that even the highest intellect has to eventually fall silent before mystery. So ultimately, the whole point of this sacred technology isn't to conquer God with our thoughts, to figure it all out. It's to train the soul in the posture of humility, to prepare the vessel and to become an empty space that's finally ready to be filled. And this brings us to the final and maybe the most human reason for this practice. Because all of that preparation, the neural pathways, the spiritual reflexes, that posture of humility, it's not really for the calm, easy days. It's for the storm. Think about it. In a moment of real crisis, sudden fear, overwhelming grief, intense pain, our analytical mind just goes offline. It checks out. We don't have the mental energy to come up with complex thoughts or eloquent prayers. In those moments, we don't think. We just default. We fall back on whatever is ingrained most deeply in our bones. And there's a scientific term for this. It's called procedural memory. This is the type of memory that holds skills and habits, like riding a bike or tying your shoes. And here's the critical part. This type of memory is way more resilient to stress, to trauma, and even to neurological decay than the memory we use for, say, facts and figures. And this is why this practice is so incredibly powerful. It explains these amazing stories you hear, like dementia patients who can't remember their own children's names but can pray a Hail Mary flawlessly. It's the soldier in a foxhole whose lips just start moving at a prayer he learned decades ago. It's grace that's remembered not just in the mind, but in the body itself. The difference is just profound. For a soul that hasn't been trained this way, faith can feel like it depends on your emotions or your intellect, both of which totally collapse in a crisis. But for the trained soul, when everything else is gone, the words come back like old friends. Faith survives as a deep and powerful instinct. So, at the end of the day, that's what this is all about. It's not mindless babble. It is the insurance of the soul. It's a lifeline that you cast out far in advance during the times of peace, knowing that one day, when the storm hits, it might be the only thing you have to hold on to. Which really leaves us with one last question to think about. In our modern age of endless distraction, constant noise, and information overload, could it be that this ancient, sacred technology of repetition is the very tool we've forgotten we need to find some stillness?